Dear Lord, we're gathered here today.
Well, I suppose you're all wondering why we've gathered here today.
I'm feeling weak.
Well, today we are in southeast Talbot County, Georgia, near Junction City. And we have got special friends with us today. We've got Joy Kersey, and we have got Mr. Jim Bruce. And here we have Mr. Mike Buckner. Mike is very well known in this part of the world as not just a historian, but also a preservationist. And Mike is one of the county's most knowledgeable historians about everything in this part of Georgia, especially in this part of the world, because I believe Mike would agree, history begins at home, doesn't it, Mike?
Absolutely.
And this is home to Mike, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Joy and Jim.
Thank you, Dan, for those kind remarks. My family came here in 1830 to this very spot, and the house behind you, there's a one-room log room inside that house. It was built onto and added to. But here was the burial site for the family, and I don't know the earliest grave, maybe the 1840s, but my grandchildren are the 9th generation to grow up here, and our family was blessed, and I'm very lucky that every generation added to the place, and they never would sell anything. They were land, they didn't have any money, but they were land wealthy, and so we've tried to continue that tradition all through the years. But behind me are the family cemetery, and I don't know how many graves are out here, but this has always been the popular spot. Joy and I share some relatives somewhere back down the line, but neighbors married neighbors. My dad grew up just right past the crossroads here, and so he married my mother, Betty Ann Fielder, which was adjoining property, and so that's just how it has been.
Gotcha. Well, they had, 10 children and 13 children.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Eventually, all those children would go to school together, grow up together.
Grow up together, that's right.
Get together. And all those families became connected. So.
One of my great-grandfathers, who served in the Confederacy, had 22 children, and my grandmother had 72 first cousins.
Wow.
So I had to go to Columbus to find a wife.
Right.
Well, this is an interesting. One of my grandfathers, great-great-grandfather, was enlisted in the Confederacy, served at the 22nd Battalion Heavy Artillery at Fort Jackson in Savannah. He had probably never been 5 miles away from this site until he was enlisted into the Army. And I got involved in Savannah with the Coastal Heritage Society, and we would do a fundraiser at Fort Jackson. And we cooked hush puppies and boiled peanuts, and it was an eerie feeling to know that my grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, had actually served and was there. And he is buried in Savannah, but we never have been able to find his grave.
Oh, wow.
He died of cholera.
Gotcha. So he could be in like an unknown grave
out
there. Yeah.
And this lady, Martha Tabitha, she always had a shelter, grave shelter. And
what's the tradition on the grave shelter?
I don't know. I just know that there was always one here.
Yeah.
And we built this one many years ago after the old one rotted away. And it was the only grave shelter in this cemetery. Now, I know of a lot of grave shelters in other cemeteries, but this was the only one here.
Yeah. And what I think is interesting, talking about this, James Buckner has a marker here, and it says he's died and buried at Fort Jackson. So many times when we go and see military graves, especially Confederate graves, and we see the unknowns in these different cemeteries, and all of them are, it could be a case like this where somebody's looking for that ancestor that's unknown.
This one's an interesting grandfather. He actually fought the Indians in 1836 when there was an Indian uprising on the Chattahoochee River.
Wow.
He was a member of he fought the Red Sticks.
Yeah.
And I was like a spies, Southern Spies or something.
This is something they added. This is him.
Don't say. But he was a member.
Southern Spies Militia.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Wow.
So he was the son of Wiley Buckner.
Mm-hmm. He was born 1795, 79.
And he's the, is he the patriarch that
Yeah.
came here?
Yeah,
I take
he's
it?
the one that came here.
Wiley Buckner, born in Rowan County, North Carolina, January 7th, 1779, and died November 17th, 1866. Son of John and Mary Buckner, came to Talbot County in 1832 from Jones County, Georgia. And was that his house?
That was his original house. Now there's another house over here in the field that's built in the 1840s. It's a much nicer home.
Gotcha.
But it was not nice enough for me to really try to preserve because it became a tenant house.
Gotcha.
And it's a 2-room with a detached kitchen.
Gotcha.
And after my family got here in 1830, they acquired a little drawstring beaded leather purse from the Indians, and it's still in the family today. I don't have it, but a cousin has it. But I used to take it to show and tell when I was about 10 years old to school. And I think all of the family's done that, taking it to school. But it was a little drawstring leather purse with fringe on it and beadwork. And my Aunt Lizzie, who died in the 1970s, she was almost 100 years old, and she was the caretaker of it. And when I'd bring it home from school, she would put it in cornmeal, dust it good with cornmeal to get our oil off of it from our hands.
That's an amazing artifact.
And she kept it. I would like to have it. Maybe one day it'll circle around.
Right. And so that's interesting that when they came here in 1832, there were still Creek.
Still Indians here.
Yeah. Because a lot of people just assume when the land treaty that everyone was removed, but that's not, it wasn't as cut and dry.
It wasn't that cut and dried. And then the other thing was, I've heard this story, if you were walking, if you were coming into the frontier walking, or maybe with an ox cart like my family, the Indians liked to trade with you. They would set up by the federal road, and if you had something, they could trade you food for whatever. But if you were in a wagon loaded with furniture, they didn't like that because they knew you were coming to stay.
Right. That
You
makes
weren't
sense.
passing through.
Yeah. Mary Buckner Reeves, born July 29th, 1826 in Jones County and died in Taylor County, Georgia. She was a daughter of Wiley Buckner. And we've previously seen people who've come from specifically Jones County, Georgia to settle down here. It's kind of interesting to see that on there. Because this is, again, the story of westward expansion as people kept chasing new territory as it became available, from here in the 1826 to after the Creek War of 1836. A bunch of people who were continuing to chase western expansion went to Alabama and then on to Texas. It's very interesting to see and think about how it happened and the lessons that can be learned from westward expansion that happened historically here. And we see a westward expansion family that chose to stay here. This is Micah W. Buckner, born April 20th, 1805, Jones County, Georgia. Died September 1843 in Talbot County, Georgia. He's a member and deacon of the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church.
Something that Mike knows that's very interesting to folks in this part of the country is these headstones like this and these concrete slabs. They are very common in this area, and I have never known who made these, but Mike knows who created these.
I don't know what that is right there, but Burl Watson was the guy's name from Highwood, Georgia.
Gotcha. And about when was he making these?
This one is 1885. My great-great-great-grandfather's buried down at Charing Cemetery, Bloodworth Cemetery. You know where Mount Nebo Church is?
Mm-mm.
That's Malk, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
He's buried down there, and
Charing.
He died, I believe, in 1885. His name was John Hudson, and he has a headstone identical to that.
Gotcha.
One. This one's 1885.
1835.
Is it 35?
Mm-hmm. I believe. No, you're right, 1885. And
this,
that one right there,
one's
small one, is
1872.
1872.
And that one over there is 1880, looks
Yeah.
like
6.
Right.
89 or 80.
So sometime in
nine.
the second half of 1800.
Yeah.
So this part of the country, he obviously
Joy,
learned how to do concrete work
Joy, see if y'all can make this out.
with the abundant sand here.
Rescue
Right.
with my,
The guy that made these name was Burl Watson, and that's a B and a W, but I don't know what that is.
it looks like a symbol almost.
What's the name of the headstone?
If I could get this to turn on.
She was Elizabeth Buckner Edwards.
Looks like Edward.
Okay, B,
Ruther,
W.
I'm sorry, Ruther.
This looks like a symbol of some sort.
BW Manufacturing,
Is that what it is?
MFG.
Yep.
There you go.
Now her daddy was
Makes sense.
Micajah. That taller marble over there is this person's father.
That makes sense.
What'd you say his name was? Watson?
Burl Watson.
Well, that's a BW.
And what is that? A symbol?
That looks like MFG.
Oh, it
Yeah.
is for
Yeah,
hers.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
company?
That's his copyright, man.
Interesting.
That
I
looks
knew
like
I had seen that on
GEO.
some of these,
Huh.
and
I've never seen
maybe
that.
not all, but
This is the poem you were talking about?
yeah, there's a poem on this one, so it's gone. Nothing on this one.
There's another Confederate veteran who was killed on picket. Killed on picket, Petersburg, Virginia, in 1864, August 25th, 1864. James N. Lawrence.
BW. Oh yeah, MFG.
Oh, there it is.
MFG ink? I don't know.
That's the date.
Oh,
I think probably the date that he made the.
but that's the G. And that's
Just
only 3.
run out.
Ran out of.
Run out of space, maybe.
It's 1890.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, you're so
Yeah,
smart.
that's early.
It's 18
Cool.
9 something.
That's interesting.
Yep.
This is one of those vaults with a top and all that.
So it looks like he
No
could have come
vault.
back about a year later.
Oh,
There's no vault.
oh yeah, because this is.
Yeah, this would be, although it's a different
The
kind.
stacks.
I wouldn't consider it a fault script, but that's I think what you're talking about. It's a fault script, but this one's
My
just a.
granddaddy said they just dug a hole,
Yep.
put the box in, and then laid slabs on top of that, and then put dirt on it.
Okay.
Now, is that his wife?
And a lot, yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of these, we think it is, a lot of these, over all my life, they've been sinking and caving in, and we'd be filling them in with dirt.
Yeah.
That's when I brought a load of sand.
That's the Cosby place.
I do. I bought that.
And so this says the old Fort Perry Road, War of 1812. During the War of 1812, this rare original section of the Federal Road, 1806, known as Old Fort Perry Road, was a main transportation route for military supplies and troops defending against British forces on the Gulf Coast. Few remnants of the original road remain. The Federal Road, which followed the old Indian Path postal route through the Creek Nation, was widened in 1811 under orders from President James Madison. Along this road in 1813, General John Floyd, commander of the Georgia militia, constructed Fort Perry, 20 miles southwest of this site between Fort Mitchell on the Chattahoochee River and Fort Lawrence on the Flint River. Fort Perry, a stockade fort, was a supply base where troops were garrisoned to help ensure safe passage for travelers. Expansion of the Federal Road for the military and increased pioneer settlements were major factors leading to the Creek Indian War against Creek Red Stick Indians, allies of the British. For generations, descendants of the early Talbot County pioneers, Wiley and Judith Tapley Buckner, have owned and preserved this rare site. And that's the Federal Road right there across the
There's
street from
actually
us.
about 3 miles of the road that we use today.
That's
It's a
awesome.
field road. It's
Yeah.
not a public road. But the road ran north and south of here. When we met Jim Bruce, it went across 208 toward Jim Bruce's place, and then it goes south of here about 3 miles. And like I say, we still use it. We find artifacts along the road, old buggy rims, and
That's awesome.
there was a blacksmith shop right down here further. We plow up a lot of stuff.
Wow, that's awesome. And this is what the
Yeah.
shape of the fort.
That fort, and let me go back just a little bit. Fort Hawkins in Macon, and then Fort Lawrence on the Flint River, and then Fort Perry here, and then Fort Mitchell in Alabama was all connected by this road. And this segment is just known as the Fort Perry Road. But they were all connected, and they were to keep the Indians either to the south or west of us.
Okay.
And the fort at Fort Perry was built in a star-shaped pattern. You can actually see the pattern if you're above it or use one of those flying drones. You can see the earthwork is still in the shape of a star.
That's right. It's in someone's backyard, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
And it was interesting, I never knew about this, but somebody said, well, have you been to the Statue of Liberty? And I said, certainly. Well, it's on a star-shaped fort.
Oh, wow.